Good morning. Wow. Thank you all so much for being here. Thank you, Natalie, and the amazing Creative Mornings team for this opportunity to share my story a little bit with you all. And again, thank you all for being here. This is fantastic. I should have drank more water and less coffee before I got up here. Oh, thanks. They were at Treat Yourself last year when I became the boss, so thought they were good boss shoes. Hi, I'm Bekah, and I'm an alcoholic. The first time I uttered those words almost 11 years ago, I did not know that that was the first step on a transformative journey that would lead me to living a life that I had never imagined. I did know in that moment that immediately following that utterance, I exhaled completely and wholly. I actually felt myself begin to settle into my own body. And I couldn't tell you the last time I felt like that. Prior to that utterance, in case it wasn't already clear, life was kind of a shit show. Except that I didn't really know it, because years ago, I had internalized a perception of the world that told me that the only way that I was going to find my way, the only way that I was going to feel comfortable in my own skin, is if you all told me I was good enough. If you all told me I was smart enough, pretty enough, fast enough, strong enough, right? And so really early on, like I said, I internalized that has how I had to navigate the world is reflected in your eyes, reflected in your words. And so I began to put together a toolkit at the young age of probably was in 7th grade. As they mentioned in my bio, which, Lord, I didn't think they were going to read. They told me they'd read the whole thing, but I kind of forgot. I was born and raised on a cattle ranch. My grandma and grandpa lived up the hill. Mom and dad and my brother and I went to a country school, 2-room schoolhouse. There was like 4 people in my class. And life was pretty idyllic and pretty chill. And then in 7th grade, we had to go to town school, which was 35 miles away in the big booming town of Bison, South Dakota, which has approximately 350 people in it on a good day. But that was the first time that I ran into social hierarchy of any sort. And all of a sudden, I wasn't just like the bright young girl that was perfect in her dad's eyes. And I didn't know what to do, so I started, like I said, to develop this toolkit of how to navigate being accepted, right? Finding comfortability in my own skin. Needless to say, I didn't necessarily put the best tools in that toolkit. One of the first tools that I learned was how to be a chameleon, how to be a shapeshifter, how to twist myself into whatever it was that I thought you wanted me to be, so that you would say, wow, that was amazing, you're so funny, gosh, you're smart, right? I also learned at that early age, self-harm was one of the things that I put in my toolkit, because I didn't know what to do with all these emotions. I didn't know what to do with the pain that I felt when the person who had accepted me the week before was now shunning me, right? So I had that. That's a fantastic tool to have in your toolkit, helping you navigate life. This was a really effective tool that I honed to a sharp edge by the time I uttered those words almost 11 years ago. And that was, I am going to do an opposite action, expecting you to act in a different way. It didn't come out quite right. I would put myself in situations seeking, again, acceptance, love, adoration, whatever it was, But I would put myself in situations where that just wasn't going to be the outcome. It just wasn't. I tried relationships with unavailable people. I tried, again, I just was sublimating myself over and over and over again to build this facade of greatness or laid backness or whatever it was that I was trying to accomplish, whatever it was I thought you wanted me to be. And one of the best and longest lasting tools that I put in this toolkit was alcohol. Because man, did that make me feel comfortable in my own skin. That turned me into whoever I needed to be with ease. And it also made me not think about how insecure I was. It made me think about, it let me just release and forget and completely melt myself into something that didn't really exist. Now, again, on the outside, this looked fine. I always had jobs, I had a home, I had a car, people thought I was funny, they thought I was this fun party girl. I came down to Omaha to attend Creighton University, and for a brief moment in that first year, I did find a little bit of myself, because I think it's because I had a new place to start in, new faces to start over with, but I was still there, right? That darkness within me was still there, and it eventually won over again. My sophomore year of college, I spent a short time in St. Joseph's Center for Mental Health, or the Nut Hut, as we called it, those of us that were in there. And that was another place where all of a sudden I could breathe again. Because there were people in there whose brains and insides were a lot like mine. And so when I left there, I had a little bit more help. I had more effective tools in my toolkit. I was seeing a therapist, I was on medication, and things were going a little bit better. And then, unfortunately, unexpectedly, and terribly, my junior year in college, my little brother, who was in his first year at college, died. And that was my person. He and I, like I said, I grew up on a ranch in the middle of nowhere. When we were younger, we were pretty much our only playmates, and we stayed best of friends all the way through. He always supported me. He always accepted me. He was always my buoy, right? He was the one I could turn to with anything. And I always felt special in his eyes. And I just figured that meant the world didn't even want me if my best friend was just yanked so unceremoniously away from me, right? And I will stand here and say that I would have ended up an alcoholic whether or not my brother died. I believe that in the core of my being. But that definitely helped me turn to that tool with increasing frequency. And yeah. So long story short, I spent the next, 10-ish years of my life putting on a mask, showing up to work, being fun, but really just getting more and more empty, losing more and more of myself as time went on. I was collecting DUIs. It's not the best collection to have, but I was really good at it, which is one of the things that led me to that moment almost 11 years ago. I woke up in jail in May of 2012. Wasn't the first time. Hopefully it'll be the last time. And I was more exhausted and tired and just like to my core than I'd ever been in my entire life. I wanted something to be different. I didn't know what it was in that moment. That was not the aha moment. I did not stop drinking in that moment. But it cracked something open inside of me enough that I knew that I was willing to start to take an actual look at the reality of the way that I was living. It also meant that I was willing to start taking suggestions to do things that might change that. Because I'd just been running myself into a wall for years and getting nowhere. And so one of the suggestions, it's not a suggestion, was when the state of Nebraska said I could no longer drive my car, I actually stopped driving my car. I had not in the past. This was not the first time they'd ever asked me to not drive my car, but it was the first time I actually said, oh, okay. And that led me, again, into this journey that I didn't know at the time what was happening, but it's so clear now. When you have to take public transportation in Omaha, you have to pay attention to what you're doing, because the buses don't run frequently and they don't run far. And so oftentimes you are hoofing it from one place to another to try to make that next connection. And what that brought me was an ability to be in the moment and really see what's going on around me. Because my base programming tells me that I'm either going to worry about the past or I am going to concern myself so much with what the future looks like that I completely miss anything that's happening right here, right now. And I'd lived my whole life that way up until that point, wishing for something better or beating myself up about these things that happened in the past. So all of a sudden, I was forced into this space where I had to pay attention literally to the ground in front of me, right? Because if you and I were to go for a walk, we'd laugh and chat and point at trees and stroll along. But when you're trying to get from point A to point B, because these are how you get around, you're looking at the ground, right? Because you got to make sure you can make the fastest way there and not like biff it and eat concrete. And that's when all of a sudden I started noticing all these really amazing little tableaus around that I didn't ever notice when I was in a car or when I was drunkenly swaying around the neighborhood picking other people's peonies because I thought I needed a bouquet for myself. Sorry, if they were your peonies. There's a lot that night. And so I'd also happened to get my first smartphone around that time. And so here I had this wonderful camera right in my pocket. And so I just started taking these little pictures. And I was newish to Instagram, so I started putting them on Instagram. And a friend of mine was like, ooh, is this a series? And I was like, I don't know, is that what you do on Instagram? And so I started doing that. I'm a very clever person. I fancy myself to be anyway. So I would try to come up with hashtags that no other hashtag had existed before like that. I didn't know how Instagram worked. That's really what that meant. But yeah, it started to progress, and lucky for me, because sometimes I have to kind of sneak these things on myself. It happened so organically that it just became a part of my everyday practice. And it was this really great way to just check in, be in the moment, and then move on with the rest of my day. Let's see, what else did I begin to accept? I accepted that I couldn't do this alone. I don't know where society, my mother, I don't know, but I had internalized as well that I was the one that was supposed to be able to figure it all out. I was the one that's supposed to know all the things. If someone asks me a question and I don't know the answer, that's a reflection on me not being good enough, right? That would usually spin me, and still can. None of these things I'm talking about are completely eradicated from my life except the alcohol, right? I get defensive because all of a sudden I feel like I'm a failure because I don't know the answer to your question, right? Or I don't have the resources that you're asking me for. And that's just not, it's not a comfortable way to be. And so I began to really have to, especially because I was not driving, as we've already pointed out, I had to lean into accepting help when it's offered. And so that was huge for me because, again, like I said, I'm an independent, self-made woman. I don't need help. I don't want your help. And I'm super smart, so surely there's nothing that you can tell me that I don't already know, right? These were all of these walls and facades that I had built up over time to help me be able to navigate life, right? And one by one, little by little, practicing a different way of living has slowly but surely started to break those facades down. I learned how to be willing to take suggestions from other people that I watched in rooms other than these that were happy, joyous, free, right? And the thing was, the reason I believed them is because when they would open their mouth and talk, they said the same things that I was feeling inside, right? And so I went, oh, I'm not alone in this. And if they can do this, if they can achieve a life where they so clearly feel comfortable in their skin, maybe I can do it too. And so little by little, like I said, we just started chipping away, and I started accepting help, and I started accepting suggestions. And I started to learn that the core of me was enough, right? And then that really is when it began to shift, right? Of course, I still look to all of you for acceptance and love and adoration, right? That's just human. But the thing is, I can, with more frequency, look towards me for that. And the amazing thing is, when I started doing that, I'm able to accept all of you with so much more ease, because that was one of the issues, right? My relationships with other people, all of the relationships, romantic, familial, friendships, all of them. There was always a block. I would never let it get past a certain place. I had all these defenses, but I also, it's because I made up all these rules in my head, right? Some of them came from society. A lot of them came from my mom. But like, I have all these rules that exist to make me feel better in comparison to you, right? Because it made things easier. I felt less bad about myself if I could find something wrong about you. But that also hinders any growth of relationship, because if I can't accept you where you're at and see the gifts in you, right, how am I going to grow? How is our relationship going to grow? And so that is a place that I'm so grateful to say that today I'm in more often than not. Of course, I absolutely get wrapped up in my head. I get wrapped up in my fear, right? I fear I'm not enough. I fear I'm going to lose this thing I have. All of those things are at play every morning when I wake up. But the more that I lean into accepting you where you're at, because I want to accept me where I'm at, it's been extraordinary. It's been absolutely extraordinary, right? I have developed some of the most amazing friendships and relationships that I've ever had in my life. I have repaired relationships. I have managed to find a way to have a relationship with my mom. I know I keep throwing her under the bus. She's really an amazing person, right? A woman that mentors me in my program of recovery years ago, I'm so upset. I was like, oh, my mom, she's pushing all of my buttons. And she goes, well, Bekah, it's because she put them all there. Oh, yeah, she did. Yeah, she did. Ooh, good. I wanted to blame her for anything anyway. No. And so it's just been this amazing journey, right? Of being able, the only way I can be comfortable in my own skin is if I accept myself where I'm at. And that also means I have a desire to grow and change now. Before, if I didn't get it right the first time, I was probably going to chuck it, because my perfectionism and my people pleasing was my guiding principle. And so there were so many opportunities that I would half start or false start and then fall back, because I'd convinced myself that it wouldn't go the way I wanted it to. So I'm not even going to try. Now I'm learning to push through that. I practiced yoga for a while when I first got sober, and one of my yoga instructors said, it's a good thing when you start to fall out of poses, because it means you're pushing your own edge. You're pushing your levels of comfortability. And I really liked that, and I try to carry that with me. And again, I'm not perfect at it, right? This is a practice of acceptance for me. Most things that I do in my life is a practice, because I'm never going to have it perfect, but I can sure keep putting the work in on it. In accepting myself, like I said, I'm more readily able to accept other people, places, and things. I will say, because sometimes I think folks, when you hear acceptance, you think it means that you become a doormat, or you have to just withstand things that you don't want to withstand. And for me, that's not true. What acceptance gives me is a clearer picture of what's actually going on. If I try to remove my expectations and my warped perception of things, I can see things as they are. Now, this can be a relationship with another human, this could be a terrible boss at work, whatever it is. But then I'm able to act, right? Then I'm able to take action. Is this a situation that is untenable? I'm going to find a way to make it end, get out of it, right? Is this a relationship that I know is going to be really difficult, but I want to put the work in to see what happens if we both are able to accept each other and move forward together? Then yes. And so that's another place where acceptance has played such a huge role in my life, is it allows me a clear picture of what's actually going on. Because this brain, ooh, it likes to tell stories. Man, it likes to distort things. My expectations, they also distort things and tell me things that aren't necessarily true. And so it may be a no-brainer to some, but that inner acceptance was this thing that I just didn't even know. I didn't even know could be a thing because I was so focused on that external acceptance. And I am filled to the brim with gratitude. And that's another thing that comes with, like, I can practice gratitude today on a regular basis, which also keeps me grounded in the present. And it's extraordinary. This life is extraordinary. Like I said at the beginning, I am living a life now that I would have never imagined. If I were to go back and tell that version of me that this would be my Friday morning, I would not have believed it. Yeah, so I hope that you all can walk away with a little bit of something this morning. And I cannot tell you how grateful I am that you all came this morning to support me. And yeah, I'm grateful. Yeah.
Yeah, when you talk about your well-developed toolkit, and even later when you talk about your rules for different people in life, are either of those like and/or something you were aware of at the time, or something you only saw later?
It was definitely, by and large, something I only saw later. I didn't know that these things that I was putting in the toolkit weren't effective. I mean, not long term, and clearly they were effective. They got me through certain periods of my life, right? But they're not sustainable. Yeah, and so I didn't really know until hindsight. Even right up until the very end, I kept telling myself that everything was just bad circumstances and unfortunate things, and surely it wasn't me.
Can you tell us one or two things that were most surprising to you about your trajectory towards recovery in the last several years that you've had? Something that either was unexpected. I mean, the whole thing, obviously, you say you would not imagine yourself in this position right now, but something that really surprised you about yourself or about your experience that you kind of look back on?
Yeah. I think one of the things that really just pops in my head right away is the relationship with my mom. We were always each other's like sparring partners, and I always had zero to no patience with her. And when I decided, because that's the other thing that accepting people where they're at allows me to do, is I can actually be, I'm looking at them, my compassion can open up. It didn't have that before because I was so worried about how I was appearing to others. That's why judgment was so much easier. But I realized that I can just love her where she's at and understand that I can't force change, but I can show her what change looks like. And so we are closer now than we've ever. I didn't think that was ever going to be a thing. I think for me personally, one of the things that's so surprising is the more I get vulnerable, the more I share about myself, the better things, not get, that isn't really the phrase I want, but the more honest and open and willing I can be, the more the world opens up as an honest and willing and vulnerable place. And that, I just didn't ever think that sharing my, what was the quote from the thing, the painful thing that like weaves its way in, I didn't ever think that that would be the thing that would cause connection, because I thought I needed it to be perfect and shiny for you to find that connection.
As Lynn took her last drink on May 14th of 2012.
Ooh, yeah.
We have a lot of parallels. I will say that I'm really, really glad to see that you found your way out of the hole earlier in life than I did. One of the things that was the most important lesson to me about acceptance was that acceptance of reality does not mean that you like it, that you approve of it. It just means you acknowledge that that is reality, and then you decide, I decide, how I'm going to react to that reality, okay? Because the universe does not demand your approval, okay? And that was a huge lesson for me. And over the course of my getting sober, learning to stay sober, building a new life, total life reboot, you know, I can honestly say that I am now living the life that I had envisioned for myself when I was like in my early 20s. It just took me 40 flipping years to get here.
Awesome. Super glad you're here. Yeah. You know, and that's one of the things you said, that's one of my goals, right? I spent most of my life reacting to life, reacting to people and places and things. I want to interact with life, right? And that's what that acceptance allows me to do, because if I can pause, really look at how things are, then I get to make that decision to interact, and I don't always have to be first thought in it all over the place, right? Because my base programming is still right there on the surface, right? So I have to find that space to allow acceptance to come in, right? And I find that in those pauses. Yeah, because I want to interact with you all. I want to interact with the world. I don't want to constantly be in reaction. Thank you all so much.